Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop with Blue Stoop. Today, we have a very special session with some members of the Random House team, and today we were going to be talking a little bit about the interviewing process when it comes to publishing. So we have Libby Burton, Katie Berry, and Matt Inman. You guys can take it away.
Thank you, Taylor. So as you were giving your spiel, my Wi-Fi cut out and I was kicked off, and which was like a perfect actually intro to how I was going to introduce my colleagues, and also like an icebreaker, which was my question for my colleagues was going to be, what was your most embarrassing interview moment? And I was trying to think of both an in-person one and a digital one, and like that's the perfect example. What if you are in a digital interview and your Wi-Fi cuts out, right? And I think the number one, I was like, don't panic, and then also have a backup. So I had a backup. So now we are on my cell phone. And it's working. So here we are. Anyways, all that is to say, thank you guys for joining. I'm really excited to be here and to sort of have this 3-part series about getting a job in publishing. And we're trying to get a bit specific and granular and like give you all skills that will actually help you get a job and get through the interview process. So today specifically, we're going to concentrate on an interview. And we are going to sort of talk through just tips and tricks and strategies and our own experiences. So I'm going to start by introducing us, and then we're going to get into it. So my name is Libby Burton. I am a nonfiction editor at Crown, which is an imprint and now a division of Penguin Random House. And I know Taylor was talking about there are some questions about the organization of Penguin Random House and how it works. And honestly, it's confusing, right? And honestly, it has changed since we sent out information about these sessions and now, which is to say, Crown used to be an imprint, which is part of the Random House division, which is part of Penguin Random House. Crown has since become its own division. So we are independent in that way of how we're marketing and publicizing our books, and yeah, so there's these various divisions and at a publishing house like Penguin Random House, and the things that are in flux. But we're going to talk through sort of how to help you understand those, and also if you're interviewing in a certain books that are feminist minded. I've had the great luck of working with writers and thinkers like Stacey Abrams, Congresswoman Katie Porter, even Mariah Carey, which was an experience. So yeah, let me just knock it over to my colleagues, Matt and Katie. And if you each want to introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Katie.
Hello, I am Katie Berry. I'm an assistant editor at Crown, which Libby just explained the organization of so well, because frankly, it's gotten quite confusing
Debatable
over the last couple of weeks. So that was helpful. Thank you. I am kind of juggling 2 tasks as an assistant editor. I'm both starting to acquire my own list and, networking with agents, but also still assisting 2 editors, in this case, our editorial director and an executive editor. And that means kind of handling all things admin for them and also helping to edit their lists. So under them, I've had the privilege to edit authors like Matt Desmond, Eric Larson, and Alexis Coe. And my most embarrassing interview moment was there are some publishing houses. This is again going back to how confusing the organization of many publishing houses is, where there is an imprint that has the same name as the publishing house itself. So for example, Random House is separate from, like, there's a Random House imprint and a Random House division, and it gets very confusing. They're not the only one in the industry where that's true. So I had been told that I was going to interview for a name of a division, and I had thought that was the name of the imprint, and I had prepared for that imprint. And it turned out it was actually a very different imprint of that division, which was doing literary fiction, which I did not know anything about. So that went great. as you can
That's
imagine.
terrifying.
It was not
Did you
my
have
best.
did you have a moment in the interview when you're like, oh my God, this is like
They were really nice. Like they were like, "Oh, you poor sweet child. Like you had no idea." But I did not get it, in case you're wondering.
But you did eventually get a job, which is to say
I
that
did.
you don't have to master this crazy system
But you
to
will through us.
infiltrate it.
And I'll pass it along to Matt.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Inman. I am also an editor here at Crown with Libby and Katie, a narrative imprint, but my role is a little bit different in that I split my time between two different imprints. One, the narrative imprint at Crown, and then an imprint called 10 Speed Press, which is actually based in San Francisco, which is an illustrated book imprint. So my list comprises both people who are primarily writers, but then also people who are sort of visual artists and in different ways. I have worked at a handful of publishers over the course of my career. Everything went from HarperCollins to Hyperion, Penguin Random House, and actually got my start in the world of television at ABC Sports. As far as my most embarrassing story, this was when I was at a company that was about to be closed, and one of my bosses actually helped me secure a coffee with someone who was hiring for a role. And I sort of broke my first rule, which is always to give myself a really big buffer when I have to get to the interview because of the vagaries of the New York public transit system. And it was just one of those days where I was cutting it too close. I had like 2 trains, I got stopped on bridges and stuff. By the time I got there, this person had left after sitting there for an hour. And then I also realized I had written down an hour after when it was actually supposed to be. So I was almost like 2 hours late. Needless to say, I had to write a very apologetic note to this man, to my boss who had secured it for me. He was nice about it, but I never heard from him again. So it was a good lesson about not stressing yourself out before an interview, which I'll talk about a little bit later today.
That is terrifying.
That is
absolutely
terrifying.
chilling.
Yeah. Which like the takeaways here, like, which I don't know, Katie, yours was not, it's almost unavoidable, but I guess double check your resources. Mine is like, if you're gonna have a digital interview, like have a backup internet source if possible, which is very stressful, but maybe it's your phone or maybe it's something else. And yeah, always give yourself like so much time. I had a sort of like my in-person embarrassing story was just basically also being like super late and also an interview in like July in like Lower Manhattan and just being just like sopping wet with sweat and like wearing this like beautiful like silk shirt that is like my and like a blazer. Like I don't even think I had a blazer. I think I just had like this silk shirt on that was just like stuck to me. And just like terrible. So give yourself ample time. Give yourself time to hang out in a grocery store and dry off if you're sweaty. It will only behoove you in the end. So it happens to the best of us. And it's a different thing online, but yeah, things can go wrong. So okay, so basically we're gonna do this, and generally maybe Taylor said this, if you guys have questions, like whenever they come up, put them in the chat. We're probably only going to address them at the end, but if something comes to mind and you want to just like get it out, put it in the chat and we'll come back to those later. Yeah, and also if you want to like turn camera off and ask questions at the end, that's great. Or if you want to leave camera off and ask questions at the end, that's great. If you want to turn camera off at any time, we love to see your faces, but I also get that you're probably mostly multitasking as we all are. So I will also add, we are all editors, right? So we have a very specific experience in publishing. However, I think a lot of what we're going to say is translatable and transferable to other arenas of publishing, be it publicity or marketing, copy editing, finance. It's a starting point and you can sort of like drill down in those areas. And we're going to talk about some of those in like the later series. I think in the third one of these 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk. I have a bunch of people coming in who are not editors and have other jobs in publishing because there are many other jobs in publishing. So, okay. So I'm going to do sort of a little overview on getting to the interview. And then Katie's handling preparing, right? Yes, and then Matt's going to talk us through the actual interview itself. So, So you want to work in publishing, right? Like, where do you even start? I think it's very important to have a lay of the land in terms of like where to find publishing jobs. A really good place to start is like where they're listed, right? So you can apply for them. The, the websites of the big 5 publishers: Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, Macmillan. What am I forgetting, guys? I always forget one. Hachette.
There you
Yes, I know I stumped you guys too. Yeah, so their websites will always have job listings there, and you can check them periodically. A place like Publishers Marketplace, I'm going to talk a little bit about Publishers Marketplace as a resource. If anyone knows Public Marketplace, like, and if you want to like say so in the chat, I'd be really curious to know. But it is a wonderful resource. It's not a free resource, but it is a place where nearly like every job in publishing will get posted. And I believe the job board is free, so you do not have to subscribe to this website. And to that end, actually, I'm going to use a little visual here. Let's see here, and I'll show it to you. It is a janky website. It is not attractive, but it is full of critical information. Brand knows it. Excellent. It is full of critical information for publishing. And I don't know, Matt and Katie, do you guys use it for your jobs often? Yeah, I use it like every day.
I use it
so
every day.
Yeah. So here it is. Can you guys see that? Matt and Katie, you can tell me if my screen share is working.
You're all good.
works perfectly.
So here is this website. It's not beautiful, but there's a lot of information here. The job board, I believe, is free. And so you can just sort of like navigate that. And I would check it even every day because time is often of the essence with publishing jobs. And if you see a job, jump on it. So publishersmarketplace.com. You can also pay for a subscription. And this gets a little bit more sort of like in the weeds and maybe into like preparing for an interview, say if you have one. So you have an interview and with a specific editor, you know who it is, and you want to know what books they worked on. If you pay for a subscription here, and I'm just going to bring up my page right here, you can see books that people have. You can see books that people have worked on. See, there's me. And yeah, it's not every book I've ever edited, but it is a fair amount of them. So you can go in sort of with a very good idea of what books an editor has worked on. So I pulled up the pricing on this as well too, because it's not cheap, but
I believe is it $25 a month? Is that
$25 a month? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that in the interview prep section, I was going to talk a little bit about Publishers Lunch, which is the newsletter. And I believe that is free. And that has a lot of the kind of the greatest hits in a way, but we'll get into that later.
Totally. I also say like, if you're really sort of like focused on getting a job, maybe like you do it for 1 month, right? And you're like, okay, I'm just going to like use this as much as possible. I often like pull information from there and turn it into a PDF too, and then keep it. So say you find a certain editor or agent, you pull their page, turn it into a PDF, and then you can keep that forever. Kieran said, yes, I know this. It's where writers announce their acquisitions. Exactly, which is, I love that it's become a thing. For many years, I think just the industry used it, and then it became a public way for writers to announce when they have deals. It makes me happy, but also it's amazing. Like I've been in publishing over a decade, layout has not gotten better. No redesign. Why would they? So yeah, that's a good place to look for jobs. And we're going to talk sort of from our experience at Penguin Random House, which is a big corporation. And oftentimes jobs, when you apply for a job, like resumes are screened by our HR department. And we're going to talk about ways to get around that as well too. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you're going to just, apply on a website, upload a cover letter, and upload your resume. If you see a job listing on Publishers Marketplace, you can sort of dig around and find out a little bit more of that, which kind of comes to how do you set up your resume and your cover letter to make them make sure they get read, first of all, and two, to make sure that people want to talk to you. So I'm going to start with the resume bit. The number one thing is just to make it correct, like no typos, like no errors. I think like there's less worry about it being necessarily perfect, as to say like perfect in a way like, oh, you did this internship here, or you did this sort of like you worked here, as opposed to interesting maybe. And I think of sort of the resume is like the bones of what you've done and who you are, and then the letter is like you as the flesh and blood of sort of like, why do you want this job? Why do you love books? Why will you be a sort of passionate, fun, interesting person to work with? So I'm now I'm getting distracted by questions, but I know, Justin, you have a long, interesting question. We'll come to that at the end. Also, I think things like breaks in resumes, like say you did something else for a little while, say you worked in restaurants for a while, say, you had to take a break for whatever reason. I think that in this 2023 in the interviewing environment, like that is totally more understandable than it was at some point. I'd much rather work with someone who was very passionate about books and sort of understood the marketplace, and maybe took a year off and did whatever, as opposed to someone who, didn't have those life experiences. So don't be intimidated and don't be sort of like scared away because you don't think you have the perfect resume. To that end, I think it is also beneficial to have a resume that looks good. There are templates out there. There are templates online. Again, this is something I think it could be worth an investment to have it designed. Maybe you have a graphic designer who's a friend. I'm going to do one more show and tell here. I went on Fiverr, which is like a website where you can hire somebody to do something, to do graphic design for you. And I had someone design my resume, and it cost $35, which is not nothing, but is like a one-time investment. And I think is like a really nice thing to do. So here's me. You guys can see I own but one headshot. And I wore that sweater yesterday, but I'm not wearing it today. Yeah, and I think this stands out in certain ways. And like I have the Word doc to this, and like if you find an error, email me later. No, I'm just joking. There are probably errors in it because I need to proofread it. But it just looks nice. It's attractive, it's clean, it's easy to read. I think it's worth an investment, and there's ways around paying for it. If you have a friend, someone who's going to school for graphic design, like, listen, design my resume, and I'll buy you dinner, whatever. So I think it's worth that. Okay. Then in terms of the letter, I think there's two key things to think about in a cover letter to make sure it gets read. First of all, it's annoying, but you do have to rewrite it like every time for every job and like make it very personal. But if you start with a good sort of letter, like your sort of like basic letter that sort of talks about you, then you can add details to it then. So I think it's hard to make something anecdotal or a story in just a one-page letter, but if you can speak to your skills with like a brief story in a way that sort of really stands out and is personal, I think that makes a huge difference. So building on a template and making it personal. And then the other thing is, this goes back to applying for a job at a big corporation, using the keywords in the job posting, both in your resume and in the letter. Because we know automated services, automated systems are reading these things and are often sort of like taking the letters then to my HR representative, who will hopefully pass your letter to me, and just echo back sort of those words and those. Is it editing? Is it organization? Is it ability to prioritize? Use those words. Just use them. So that's your first like big writing challenge, and there will be lots of writing challenges in your publishing career, but those are sort of two ways not to get ignored. Matt and Katie, do you guys have any thoughts on like strategizing resume and cover letters?
I had one thought, which was just that what you were saying about if you spend 2 years working in restaurants or something and you're worried that that's going to hold you back. When you're on, when it's on your resume, it is hard to kind of explain that. So your cover letter, as well as your interview, is your place to kind of explain how the skills from that life experience, which might not initially look super transferable, are actually kind of applicable to the publishing industry. So definitely take advantage of that. It's not like you should not address that because it doesn't seem applicable
Totally.
to the job on the surface.
Totally.
Yeah, I
And
think-
like, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, I was gonna say that's a great point, and I'm gonna talk about it a little more when we talk about the interview bit, right? Like the cover letter is a great chance to tell a story about yourself, to give like the facts on a resume, a narrative. And just like Katie was saying, even if there's a gap where you're working in a restaurant, you work with people all the time. You have to, if you are waiting, you are sort of trying to figure out what each person wants. You're working with a staff of people. There's a way to think about what will I be doing in this job and how is it relatable. And there have been plenty of times where I've, and I think this speaks to Justin's question in the chat, like where I've read a cover letter where someone said like, I've been working in the nonprofit sector for the past like 15 years and I've always wanted to work in book publishing. And what I did while I was in this particular job, I was like, I had a team of people working underneath me and I had to figure out how each one, like they really told me a story about like how as a person who worked with people, they had a lot of experience, even if it wasn't the sort of day-to-day stuff you'll learn on the job. So take advantage of that cover letter, but keep it short. That's
Yeah.
also like a really important tip.
And I think broadly, like both of you guys' points speak to like, you don't have to have worked with books to work in books. And I think one of the weirdest and sort of most surprising things about our industry is how people and relationship based it is. If you have worked with people in any way and you've done it successfully and you've managed a team and you've solved problems and you've come up with creative solutions and you've made something work with on a tight budget, then like you could succeed in publishing if you really want to. So I think being able to portray that in your letter and then in your interview is key to all of this. And also just is to say that like we also want you like in this industry. Like this industry is based on relationships. And at the end of the day, it's people who are passionate about books, trying to get those books to other readers who and that's a relationship as well too. So yeah, I think there's so many, the people element is not to be overlooked. And I think if you can emphasize that, in your letter and your interview, it's a great thing. So thank you guys, that's great. So I have two more little points and then I'm gonna turn it over because I've done a lot of talking. So okay, you got your cover letter, you got your resume, you're uploading it to the faceless, soulless corporate website, and then you're just like sitting around being like, when am I gonna get the call? When am I gonna get the email? It's not a call anymore, it's always an email. So how do you sort of beat that system? What are other ways to do that? Networking. And how do you sort of do that? How do you do that when you're based in Philadelphia? How do you do that when you don't know anybody in the industry? So I think one way to start is go to book events. There's readings at bookstores, there's local bookstores. Hang out there, see what's happening, just sort of get comfortable in that environment. Sometimes there's an author there, sometimes there's an author or an agent who maybe an author thanks their agent or their editor who's like in the audience. And then maybe you go up to that person afterwards and you say like, I'm interested in book publishing. Like, how did you get your start? Or like, what was the experience like editing this specific book? That's a place to start. You guys have two great publishers that are based in Philly, Quirk Books and Running Press. And there's wonderful people who work there, and you can reach out via LinkedIn, which is its own sort of like thing. But if you kind of follow the same sort of principle of short, succinct, charming, specific note on LinkedIn, and you kind of do that enough, I bet someone might be willing to have a coffee with you. And if you're not 2 hours late, like Matt, they might help you get a job at some point. So yeah, make yourself available and sort of get yourself into the book scene in a certain way, like where you are, because there are book people in every single town. There's a lot of book people in Philadelphia, and the networking comes into play because there's a lot of jobs in publishing that by the time they're posted on these websites, they already have a few candidates that, you know, their friends have referred or people that have interned for them. So the question is like, how do we get around that system? We try to get ourselves in front of hiring managers and sort of front of mind. And then like internships, sure, internships are one way to do this in a lot of ways, but I know a lot of you might be like professionals already and sort of working. It's hard to do an internship that may pay, but not very much. So you got to be a little creative of like, how do you sort of insert yourself into the industry in this way? But yeah, hanging out at bookstores can be a good starting point, and it's fun.
I
Matt
will
and Katie,
also say,
yeah,
that when I was, and I think this is probably true of Matt and Libby as well, that when I was starting out, like there were just so many people that I cold emailed, and I never had anyone say no to hopping on the phone with me because everyone has been doing it. You know, it's just kind of this time-honored and slightly annoying system, but there's just a lot of kind of understanding and empathy towards that. So even though it might seem really kind of audacious to do that, it's like, it makes perfect sense. And I get those kind of requests pretty regularly, and I always go out of my way to accept them for exactly that reason.
Totally. I would also add that like if you're able to meet with one person and it goes well enough, then like at the end, ask them if they know anyone who might meet with you. And chances are they know somebody, and then, you know, you have another coffee and you get more information that way. Always, yeah. If you feel like you have a good rapport, ask that as well too. And then you're sort of building this network. So yeah, cool. Okay. So you've networked, you've applied, you have an email about, like, you get the email from HR that says like, would you like to meet with like so and so? And Katie, I'm not going to step on your toes here, but I will lead up to that moment. In terms of like scheduling an interview, they're probably going to be digital initially, right? Make yourself available, I'd say. Not crazy available, not like, oh, do you want to meet today? Okay. But like, do you want to meet tomorrow? Give yourself a night to prepare, give yourself a little bit of time, but make yourself pretty available. And, you know, sometimes that involves making around your day job, or like, you know, a sick whatever, but like working from home can offer some flexibility there. So, all right, I'm gonna toss it over to Katie in terms of preparing.
Thanks, Libby. I'm only gonna talk about the tip of the iceberg here because you can kind of just prepare, like, it is what you make of it. You know, you could prepare every hour of every day for 2 weeks and that would be amazing, but most of us don't really have that luxury. The way I think about preparing for an interview is actually in kind of two groups, where there is maybe the more obvious kind of preparing, which is what you do when you get that email saying you have an interview. But then there's also the kind of preparing that you can do even before you get that email. And Libby was talking about this a little bit. But I think, for example, Publishers Lunch, which is that newsletter, which is free from Publishers Marketplace, is kind of just the first place to start, because it's that kind of prep where it takes 3 minutes of your day every day to read that newsletter. And if you have been reading it every day for weeks, you know, before that interview even gets scheduled, like, you have that amazing foundation of knowledge that you've just kind of internalized effortlessly, you know? And the other amazing thing about it is that everyone in publishing will also have been reading that same newsletter. So you automatically have this like shared body of knowledge with the person who's going to be interviewing you. So that is a huge advantage. And it just gives you a sense of, you know, which books are making shortlists, which books are getting the big reviews written about them. I unfortunately did not think to pull up today's edition of Publishers Lunch. I'm sorry, everyone. But it's basically, you know, you'll see some of the big articles about books that have come out lately. You will see a job posting as well, like Libby pointed out, and you'll see some headlines about just the state of the industry, like if there's updates on unionizing or like the fiscal year for some division or something. And that's just a way to keep your finger on the pulse in a way. And then similarly, if you have a subscription to the New York Times, you can also start monitoring the New York Times bestseller list, which is released once a week and is kind of just the gold standard in the industry of like, this is a book that has succeeded. I'm sure you've seen those words on the cover. And if you don't have a New York Times subscription, you can even just keep an eye on the Amazon bestseller lists, because those are maybe even a better way to have a sense of like which books are actually selling, because that's literally just measuring, you know, the number of copies sent out the door. So that is just a very helpful way to kind of absorb all of this. And the crucial part is that it lets you slowly over many weeks, many months, start to figure out what books are working and what books aren't. And that's like the big question that, at least for editors, like we're all trying to answer. So if you can have even a semblance of like of what that answer is when you go into your interview, like you are so well prepared already. So that's the long-term prep. And then there's the short-term prep, which, as I said, is probably more along the lines of what you're typically doing for an interview. It's like crash studying for an exam or something. It's probably, you're going to do a lot
Katie,
of
before
Googling.
you went on to short-term prep, can I say one
Yeah.
other thing about long-term prep?
Of course.
When I was interviewing and also when I started in publishing, I was so intimidated by the vastness of knowledge that just felt like I needed to have immediately. And I was like, how am I ever going to figure all of this out for a system that is not like, none of this is recorded anywhere, like none of it's written down. And I think your advice is terrific about sort of just like reading this newsletter and also like looking at books on like the Amazon, what's selling on Amazon. And because you can go to Amazon, it's like books and best selling, like you can find it on there. If you just spend time with these resources, you will be astounded at how much you can just absorb and like understand. So I would just, anyone who feels completely intimidated by like the entire book ecosystem in industry, like spend a little bit of time absorbing these resources that are free, and you will be sort of like astounded at really how quickly you have a sort of like, you have touch points of understanding. You'll see certain books that pop up again and again. You'll see that, you know, Paris Hilton has a memoir on sale. Pamela Anderson had one on sale a few weeks ago. Which one do you end up seeing more of more often? They'll tell you like which one is probably sold more copies. And then you'll see someone, you know, walking down the street like carrying it, and you'll start to sort of understand like what means a book is popular, what means a book is like well reviewed, and who's publishing which books, right? You look at the spines of books. So just give yourself like patience and like grace in like trying to understand this all, and it will come, which all is to say like there are times when it eventually just clicks and there is an understanding there. So it's a lot. No one knows it all at the beginning, but if you start slow, you will come to understand it. So all right, continue on.
No, that was a good point. And I mean, I'm 3 years in and I still don't understand a lot of it, but
Totally. Listen, over 10 years in and I'm like, what?
Yeah. But it makes more sense. It makes a lot more sense than the first time I laid eyes on an issue of Publisher's Lunch and was like, this is not even the English language. So for the short term, this is after you've gotten that email saying, we would like to schedule an interview with you. And this is when you start going down your rabbit holes. And of course, you've already done a fair amount of research because you would have had to write a really good cover letter to get that interview, which means you've already done some research into the imprint. Libby alluded to this a little bit, but another really helpful tool, once you already know kind of the big books that have done really well at that imprint lately and their mission statement, you can even try to track down who the editor or any kind of person in publishing is that you are interviewing with. Not track down, don't do that. Don't try to stalk them to their homes or anything. But if you can
check out their social media if they have it though.
You could do that.
Don't accidentally like something.
Sounds like you're speaking from experience, Libby.
Oh,
Sometimes they'll even like post on Twitter about how they're looking for an assistant. You know, like there are some people who are very transparent about these things, but usually if you cross-reference the actual imprint website, which will often have a list of like, here's our editors. And then if you, cruise through LinkedIn, you can kind of triangulate who you're supposed to be editing for or applying for the role with. Like if they said a pop culture senior editor at Crown, you're going to eventually figure out that all roads lead to Matt Inman. And that's just helpful because knowing that it's a pop culture editor is obviously gives you kind of something to focus on when you're preparing for the interview. But if you know specifically what that editor's big books have been lately, what their real like areas of interest are, like the kind of topics that their books seem to kind of circle around over and over again, then that is like your, golden ticket. Like that is exactly what you need to focus on when you're preparing, just in case they hit you with those questions.
But also I would say to be able to say, to demonstrate your ability to sort of do research and also like speak to like what is happening. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then the interview, I think the next step is really starting to envision what they might be asking you in that interview and kind of anticipating those questions. And Matt, you can stop me if I start treading on your toes at any point. But they're obviously just some gimme questions, which are going to come, and you'd kind of just be naive to walk in there without any kind of sense of what you're going to say. In publishing, especially, like the one I've never had an interview where they did not ask for a book that I've read recently. And with that one, you kind of want to strike a balance where you do want to show that your reading sensibilities are in line with that imprint, but you don't want to make them think that you're lying and just chose a book that they published in a kind of sycophantic way. So if you are applying to Crown, for example, where we do a lot of current events and political nonfiction, you could maybe say, like, Maggie Haberman's book on Donald Trump would be kind of a good answer, in that it shows that you're engaging with that kind of material without saying, I went out and I bought a book on the Crown list so that I could say that I am the kind of person who reads these books. And you'll also, of course,
this is sorry, I keep, but I'm like, this is like a real, like, specific tip, but I think is like demonstrates a bit of like sophistication, and like this is us giving you guys the goods in certain ways. Like, yeah, don't, unless you really are a real fan of like exactly what an editor does, which you're not often going to, or of what a certain publicist does or whatever, like, it has worked on, you're not necessarily just going to actually, oh, coincidentally, I just read like the book that you just worked on. Like, no one buys that.
But even if that was true, I wouldn't believe it. I mean, that's the problem.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly. Which is messed up, but like that's just that's just how it is. But then if you're like only reading like Shakespeare and like Frank O'Hara poems, then like, I think publishing people would be like, do they really sort of like, are they up to date on like what's actually happening? So it's, a recent bestseller that's sort of in the category, but not exactly that. So that's hot tip.
Great point. Speaking as an English major, it definitely took me a couple of interviews to wrap my head around that one.
Same.
I was like, I love Faulkner. Like, thank you for asking.
Love Sylvia Plath. What are you talking about? It's good stuff. Yeah.
So there are going to be a few other book questions that they're obviously going to have for you. They're going to want to know where you get your news, for example. I think the important thing about when you talk about that book, as well as kind of which book you choose, is that you come in with not just kind of, I liked it. Like, you need to have a little bit more of an opinion, and maybe even have done some market research and say, the reviews said this, it sold really well, I think it really deserved to make this shortlist. I think anything that shows that you're kind of engaging with the wider world around that book instead of just reading it in a vacuum is also something that publishers really want to see. But beyond all the book questions, because of course people in publishing do want to know that you love books, but it's also kind of a given. So there are going to be a lot of questions that are just regular job questions, like why do you want this job? And what's your greatest weakness? And what is something that you're proud of? And those are also questions that you should kind of have a sense of what you're going to say before you walk in. Libby talked about this a little bit, but one good way to kind of make you more memorable is to come up with 3 or 4 stories that you feel really comfortable telling and that kind of put you in a good light, but also really capture something about who you are as a person and not just as like a robot employee. And if those stories are sufficiently kind of general, then you can kind of fit them into any question. Like if they hit you with a, what are you proudest of? You could say, I worked in a bookshop, and when the electricity went out, I was the only person who held down the fort when they had to go turn the generator on. But that's also kind of a question to, what's the time you overcame adversity? Like you can kind of pigeonhole it. Libby, before this call, we were talking and she said, answer the question that you want to answer, which is, I think, a really smart way of putting it. So if you have like a couple of, 3 or 4 stories that are a little bit one size fits all, I don't want to make it sound like they're just generalized, but just good stories that can be used to answer a bunch of questions, then you're kind of armed in case anything comes up that you're not fully certain how to answer. And that is pretty much everything that I can think of, but I know there's a lot more for interview prep. Matt and Libby.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great setup. I mean, and I think the way I like to think about interviewing, like the interview itself, is the person has already looked at your resume and your cover letter, and they've said, this person has the qualifications, the background, this person, I like the cover letter. Like, I want to spend a half hour, an hour of my very busy day meeting this person. So, and you've prepared. So you should walk into an interview confident, like you have already made it through the filter, and that you are sitting down to talk with someone. So I think two things I try to think about is that what the interview is about is the person who's hiring you thinking about how you will fit on their team, who you are as like a flesh and blood person who takes up a unique kind of space in the world that gives a story to all the facts, all the experiences that you have had. And when I think about kind of going into the interview, I think of it sort of as like things you can control and things you can't control. And then sort of preparing that, and then going in and just being yourself, being as authentically yourself as you possibly can with people, so that they can get a sense of what you would be like to work with. And I know we're talking a lot about editorial, and I will try not to talk too specifically about that. I'll just talk more generally. But like, for example, you can't control what hole the person is trying to fill in their team. You have no idea who the other people on their team are. You going into the interview don't really know this person as well. But like, what you do know is kind of the stories that you've prepared, experiences that you will be able to turn to in this interview to like make yourself seem like a real person to them. You will have prepared some basic, I always kind of like call them, like, in case of emergency, pull here answers to some of these basic questions, so that you're like ready to roll whenever you get asked them. Like I was saying earlier, again, like a lot of an interview is managing your energy and managing, like, again, like, I told you my embarrassing story of being late, which I never ever did again before or since. Like, you don't want to be in a position where you step into an interview and you're already kind of shoulders up, nervous, because like everything has been sort of, you can control that. You can walk into the interview, be relaxed, kind of talk about it. I think one other thing I wanted to mention, and I think this speaks to a question Diane had, a very good question in the chat. You would be shocked at the number of times I've interviewed someone and they come in and it's a combination of nerves and like, I think, wanting to perform, and they will just talk straight through, uninterrupted, for 45 minutes to an hour, just talking about them and everything they've done and like all their qualifications. And yes, like when I'm interviewing someone, I want to hear more about like their qualifications and like what they've done and sort of their interest in the industry. But like, I also kind of want a conversation. This is someone, if I hire, if I'm hiring for an editorial assistant, I'm going to be working with them closely every day for as long as we work together. So I want to get a sense of them, and I want to get a sense of how we'll work together. I cannot stress like how important it is to like think about some questions that you are armed with going into this interview, so that you can have a conversation with this person. For example, I always like on an interview at some point to ask the person kind of like, what is it that they're like, what are they looking for in their team in this role? What what kind of, what kind of person are they looking for? What kind of, role like would you have? Because I think the other important thing to do is like, don't be so focused on just rattling off what you've prepared that you don't take in what you learn from someone over the course of the interview. Because if you ask someone, and to Diane, to your question, I do think it is helpful to ask someone, what is it that you're looking for? Like who do you think, what kind of person would be the best person to fit your team? Let them answer, listen to what they say, and then in the moment, think about how you can tie something from your life or your career back to that, especially if you don't have as much experience. If they say like, oh, we're a really busy team and I'm looking for someone who can kind of anticipate my needs and, in like an assistant role, think about a time where you worked for someone and you had to anticipate like helping them out, making their lives easier in some way. And I guess the other thing I would say is like in preparation and on the interview is I always like people to think about like, if you were hiring for this job, what would you want? Like if for example, I'm often hiring for editorial assistants, someone to help me out. If I go into an interview with someone who is like an editor in chief, I'm thinking about, okay, what do they want? What do they need on this team? I think that's actually really important so that as you're talking, like I've had people come in who've never worked in books before, but for example, I work in pop culture, as Kitty said, and some of my favorite interviews have been with people who are like personal assistants to like, sort of like busy, like notable people. And like, they haven't worked in books at all. They're intelligent. They want to work in publishing, but like their jobs have been to listen, to predict what someone will need, to like make their lives easier, and to also contribute value in all these other ways. And that I think that will help you sort of talk to this person in a way that I think helps them see how you will fit into this role. And then I guess just like the last thing I would say, and this kind of goes into the story, like again, every single person on this call has like something about them that makes them them. Many things, I'm sure. I know that sounds sort of woo-woo, but like you do, like everyone on this call has like a thing, whether it's a hobby, a past experience, something that will make them stand out. And I do think it is useful, to think about ways that you can work that in, because again, like kind of like a first date, like you want the person you're hiring to like you, to want to spend more time with you, and to just understand who you are and to remember you if they're talking to a bunch of people. Think about a story, think about something you want to work in. And yeah, I mean, just as I was saying earlier, like be present in the interview, like look around, like notice books on their shelves, like, respond to things. I think that unlike, when Libby and Katie were talking earlier about the person who comes in and is like, I just read this like book that you published, it feels fake, it feels false, it feels rehearsed, it feels calculated. They probably haven't read it. I would much rather hear someone just be like, I read this thing, I loved it, and here's why. And another question that I sometimes ask people for editorial jobs is like, tell me about something you read or like that you didn't really like that you didn't love. Why? Like, what would you have done differently if you could have helped them change it to make it better? What would you have suggested? Just to get people thinking about the editorial job. So yeah, those are kind of like my key pieces. I don't know if Katie, Libby, you have anything else?
We are getting the high
Yeah.
side to answer some questions. So as I chatter on for a second, if you guys have any questions about anything, put it in the chat right now. I think that is great advice, Matt. My sort of like boiled down tips, like make it a conversation. Yes, you want to like make it a conversation. And how do you best do that? You bring your best self to that conversation. How do you bring your best self there? Interviews are always nerve-wracking. You're always going to be nervous. It's a simple thing, but I started a practice of deep breathing before any interview or any big meeting, right? Like even if, it's in person or it's digital, just like make sure that you have like, first of all, you get there in time so you're not sweaty and running. And then make sure you have like a solid, literally 30 seconds of just like sitting and being and breathing like in your belly to bring yourself back to yourself so you can be your best self. And you can present that best self and you're not rushing the whole situation. So yeah, and it's a fine line, but this idea of having like 3 stories about yourself and then how making a conversation, like how do you do those both at the same time? you listen and you transition, and you reciprocate, because that interviewer is going to tell stories hopefully, and you're going to ask questions hopefully, and you're going to do the same, tell stories, ask questions, and it can go back and forth and be an exchange. To that end, one last tip, and then we'll answer questions. Make sure that you have questions as well too. Don't end that interview, because at the end they are guaranteed to ask you, do you have any questions? And don't say no. And also don't say, like, what is your vacation policy? Like, make it substantive and like flatter your interviewer a little bit. Like, how did you get to where you are? Like, what book that you published in the last year was like most exciting for you? What's your favorite book? Like, make it personal, make it make it real. So something that, okay, to that end, I'm gonna look at these questions really quick. I know we addressed Justin's question a little bit. How would you recommend make yourself stand out and get seen by publishers? Especially if you're transitioning from like a different industry, which I think a lot of you might be if you're interested in that. Matt or Katie, do you want to take this in some way? How, if you're transitioning from a different industry, how do you make yourself stand out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess this is where the cover letter, right? Because like, if the resume is going to just show what you've done, those are facts. Those are the facts of your career up to this point in your education. The cover letter is a chance for you to explain sort of like how you're trying to make this gap. And so in this case, I mean, so you're working on editing certificate right now. I mean, I think, and Libby, Katie, please, would love your take on this too. I mean, I think it would be interesting to hear you. Like, I would expect someone to say, like, I've been, doing this thing for many years, and I really realized my passion that I've always wanted to pursue is I love making writing better. It has just been something. When I was working on like communications at my previous job, people always asked me to help them rewrite things because like I help people like say things better, more clearly. People always told me that it was, one of my skills. And, as I've really thought about it, I mean, you'll say this more concisely than I am right now off the top of my head, but like, as I've thought about it, I really want to, I really am passionate about a career and taking brilliant people who have something important to say and saying it in the best possible way. And as an acquisitions editor, giving them the platform to share it. I am currently sort of undertaking, an education program to get a certificate to even make my skills even stronger. But I also am coming from blank years of experience of working every day with people in this industry, helping them through solutions and problems, helping my superiors in this way or that way. Like, so I could easily step into a role where I could do the same for you or something like that. Just telling the story about your passion and transferable skills.
Matt,
Yeah.
I would hire you. That's
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think there are two other things that I would say to build on that. One is definitely don't use your cover letter or even your interview as an opportunity to kind of cast shade on the industry that you are trying to leave. Because I think that just looks bad. And, one day you could be trying to leave the publishing industry and saying that kind of stuff. And we just, no one's going to want to hire someone who does that.
That is a great point. Like, don't talk crap about like your previous job or the industry that you're in. Rather, for whatever reason, so I want to do whatever job now. We have not talked about that. That's a really good point, Katie.
Yep. So that's one thing that I think just helps, and just having a positive outlook in general. And then I think the other is that actually I don't think it's necessarily even a bad thing to be coming from a different background than publishing. I feel like there has been a real inflection point in the industry in the last couple of years where we've kind of recognized that we're very homogenous as an industry, and we're trying to kind of just broaden the places from which we're acquiring talent. And so I actually think bringing a different perspective and a different way of looking at reading and the industry is valuable. It's not even a detriment.
Totally.
I don't know if you and Matt agree, but
totally. I think, we haven't made that point either. And I think it's so real. Like, it's not a disadvantage. It's actually an advantage if you have outside, if you have different experience. Yeah, that's great. I know we addressed this a little bit, but Diane has an actual interview next week, which is really exciting. Congrats. And so you're asking about questions to actually ask. This is such a good one. Not super practical, personal, about the interviewer, I think, and those are things that you can gather during the interview as well too. You hear them mention, maybe you're like, when I studied this, or like when I don't know, when I didn't win this book or whatever, and you can bring that back at the end and sort of ask them about that in certain ways. So I think it's striking a balance between like, yes, I'm listening during this conversation that we're having. I'm going to ask you something at the end that makes sense. And also things about, yeah, it can be as simple as, if that doesn't work, then like, tell me about your publishing like journey. Tell me how you got to this job. Tell
I
me,
just
yeah, what you enjoy about this job. Go ahead, Matt.
No, and I was also going to say, like, again, like it can be a chance to get information that's useful for you to like,
Yeah.
not in like a fake way, but just like in just responding to someone. Like sometimes it's helpful to ask, like, what did someone who was previously in this role who succeeded at, what made them successful at it? What have you liked? What have you liked with people who have been successful in this role? And let them talk to you about like,
Let
what
them
they have
tell you.
seen.
Yeah.
And then you can think about, I mean, not parrot it back to them in a really obvious way, but like think about like a way that you can show that you are a person who is going to be like this person that they probably liked, in the past. It can be really helpful to be nimble in that way, and
Yeah.
just listen.
Yep, that's actually excellent advice. Yep, you can use it to just gain more information. I think that's really smart. Okay, I'm gonna try to not have us run over, and Taylor has appeared again. So, and I think we're out of questions. But yeah, thank you guys.
Awesome.
This was
Thank
wonderful.
you everyone for coming to the session. I think we all got some really great things from the session and are super excited to continue to learn more about publishing and editing and all the things in the publishing world in the next 2 sessions. So if you guys want to go to Blue Stoop's website and register for the next 2 sessions, they will be the next 2 Thursdays, and then we will culminate with a last session that will be in person in Philadelphia at the Head in the Hand bookstore on April 6th.